The purple sky of Zilani Prime grew darker as the twin suns began to set behind the crystal mountains. Elder Tisara stood on the highest balcony of the great tower, watching the last light fade from her world. Blue skin shimmered with worry, and her forearms trembled as she held the emergency message that had arrived just hours ago. The outer colonies were gone. All of them, Vex single quotes Era, her closest friend and fellow council member, approached slowly, her usually bright yellow. Eyes were dim with fear. How many survived the attack on Kelleris Station? None, Tisara whispered, her voice barely audible in the evening wind. The machines took everything. Every person, every building, every trace of life. They left nothing but empty space. The void swarm had appeared at the edge of their star. System 3 weeks ago. At first, the Zilani thought they were just strange meteorites, or perhaps damaged ships from some distant war. The Zilani were a peaceful people who had not fought wars for over 1,000 years. They had no armies, no weapons, no knowledge of how to defend themselves. But these were not meteorites. They were something much worse. The machines moved like living things, but they were cold and merciless. They consumed entire planets, breaking them down into raw materials to build more of themselves. They had no interest in talking or negotiating. They simply took everything and moved on to the next world. The defense satellites around Tessera 7 lasted only minutes, Vexera reported, reading from her datapad. The machines just absorbed them and used their materials to make more of themselves. Tessara closed her eyes and tried to calm her racing hearts. The Zilani had 2 hearts, and both of hers were beating so fast she could barely think. How long before they reach us? Days, maybe 7, if we are lucky, Vexera replied. The scout ships report the swarm is moving steadily toward our homeworld. They will arrive at Zilani Prime soon. The 2 friends stood in silence, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, death was coming for their people. The Zilani had always believed that their peaceful nature would protect them. They had spent centuries perfecting their art, their music, their beautiful cities. They had never imagined that something so evil could exist in the universe. We must call the council, Tisara said finally. There has to be something we can do. The great council chamber was filled with worried voices when they arrived. Representatives from every city and colony were present, their faces showing the same fear that gripped Tisara's heart. The chamber, usually filled with gentle debates about art and philosophy, now buzzed with desperate planning. We could try to evacuate everyone, suggested Counselor Zethak, an elderly male with silver skin. Load our ships and flee to the outer rim. Our ships are too slow, replied Counselor Misara, shaking her head sadly. The machines would catch us before we could escape the system. What about negotiation? Asked another voice. Surely these beings want something. Maybe we can trade with them. Tisara stood up slowly, her official robes rustling in the quiet chamber. They do not want to trade. They do not want to talk. They only want to consume. I have seen the reports. From our outer worlds, they take everything and leave nothing behind. The chamber fell silent. For a people who had solved all their problems through discussion and compromise, the idea of facing an enemy that would not listen was terrifying. Then, what do we do? Whispered Vexera. Old Counselor Hashera, the keeper of ancient knowledge, raised one shaky hand. There is one possibility. In the old archives, there are records of a device our ancestors built long ago. A deep space communication array. It was used to contact other worlds when we first learned to travel between stars. We stopped using. It's centuries ago, protested Zethek. We decided it was better to focus on our own world rather than seek contact with strangers. Perhaps it is time to reach out again, Hashara said quietly. If there are other civilizations out there, maybe someone can help us. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, they had no choice. The ancient communication device was there. Only hope. The council members worked through the night to prepare the message, choosing their words carefully. At dawn, they gathered in the sacred chamber of voices, a small room beneath the great tower where the communication array had been. Installed centuries ago, the equipment was old, but still functional, its crystal components glowing softly in the morning light. Tissera stood before the transmission device, her hands shaking as she activated it. The other council members formed a circle around her, their faces solemn with the weight of their desperate situation. "We send this message to anyone who might hear," she began, her voice trembling but clear. "We are the Zilani people of the Tessara system. Our world is dying. Machines from the void are consuming our colonies and will soon reach our homeworld. We are a peaceful people with no weapons, no armies, no way to defend ourselves. We do not ask for soldiers or weapons. We ask only for sanctuary, for a place where our people might survive. If there is anyone out there with compassion in their hearts, please help us. We are running out of time." The message launched into space, a small whisper of hope traveling through the vast darkness between stars. The Zilani could only wait and pray that someone, somewhere, would hear their plea before it was too late. The lunar surface stretched endlessly outside the reinforced windows of Deep Space Station Alpha, a cold gray landscape under the black star-filled sky. Inside the station, Lieutenant Commander Park Jin-woo sat at his monitoring station, headphones pressed against his ears as he listened to the constant stream of cosmic noise that filled the galaxy. For 3 years, Jin-woo had worked the night shift, searching for any sign of intelligent life beyond Earth. Most nights brought nothing but the random static of dying stars and the whisper of solar winds. His job was to find patterns in the chaos, to identify anything that might suggest someone else was out there trying to communicate. Tonight felt different somehow. Equipment was picking up unusual signals from the direction of the Centaurus constellation, faint but persistent. Jin-woo adjusted his headset and focused on the strange pattern emerging from the background noise. "Specialist Kim Sora," he called to the young woman at the next station. "Are you seeing this on your screen?" Sora looked up from her computer, her tired eyes brightening with interest. She was one of the best signal analysts in the entire Earth's Defense Force, capable of finding meaning in the most confusing data. "What sector, sir?" "Centaurus. Grid reference 77 Alpha," Jin-woo replied, pointing to his display. "There's something here that doesn't look natural." Sora quickly adjusted her equipment and began studying the incoming signal. Her fingers moved rapidly across her keyboard as she applied various filters and analysis programs. After several minutes, she looked up with excitement in her voice. "Sir, this is definitely artificial. The mathematical structure is too perfect to be random. Someone is broadcasting this intentionally." Jin-woo felt his heart start beating faster. After years of searching, could this really be first contact with an alien civilization? How long will it take to decode? "I'm not sure," Sora admitted. "The language is completely unknown, but the signal includes what looks like mathematical concepts and visual patterns. If I can identify the basic structure, I might be able to build a translation matrix." "Do it," Jin-woo ordered, "and get me a direct line to Earth Command. They need to know about this immediately." While Sora worked on the translation, Jin-woo contacted Admiral Choi Dae-hyun, the commander of Earth's Deep Space Defense Division. The admiral was a veteran of the Mars colonial wars and had spent most of his career preparing for the possibility of alien contact. "You're certain this is artificial?" Admiral Choi asked over the secure video link. "Yes, sir. Specialist Kim is working on translation now. The signal appears to be some kind of distress message." Admiral Choi's expression grew serious. "A distress message? From whom?" "Unknown, sir. But if someone is asking for help, we need to be ready to respond." 3 hours later, Sora finally broke through the alien language barrier. Her translation program had identified key patterns in mathematical relationships that allowed her to piece together the basic meaning of the message. When she read the decoded text, her face went pale. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jin-woo read the translation on her screen, and his blood ran cold. The message described an entire civilization facing extinction, consumed by some kind of mechanical plague. The aliens called themselves the Zilani, and they were asking not for weapons or armies, but simply for a place to hide. "Get me, Admiral?" "Choi again," Jin-woo ordered. "Emergency priority." Within hours, the decoded message had reached the highest levels of Earth government. The Global Defense Council convened an emergency session, with representatives from every major nation participating by hologram link. Admiral Choi, stood before the assembled leaders, holding a printed copy of the alien distress call.
Ladies
And gentlemen, we are facing an unprecedented situation. An alien species is requesting our help. They're being attacked by what they describe as a void swarm of mechanical entities. President Williams of the North American Federation leaned forward in his chair. What exactly are they asking for? Sanctuary, Admiral Choi replied. They want us to provide refuge for their people. They specifically state that they are not requesting military assistance. Defense Minister Song Haijin from the Asian Alliance spoke up. But if we provide sanctuary, won't these machines simply follow them to Earth? It's a possibility, Admiral Choi admitted, but we have another option. The room fell silent as the assembled leaders waited for him to continue. We can show them what humans do when someone asks for help, Admiral Choi said firmly. We don't just offer hiding places. We eliminate the threat. General Morrison from the European Union frowned. You're talking about war with an unknown enemy. We have no idea what we would be facing. Sir, with respect, we know exactly what we're facing, Admiral Choi replied. We're facing an enemy that destroys entire civilizations. We don't stop them now, they'll eventually reach Earth anyway. The debate continued for several hours, but the decision was never really in doubt. Humanity had spent centuries fighting wars, defending their world, and protecting the innocent. The idea of abandoning an entire species to genocide was unthinkable. President Williams called for a vote. All in favor of military intervention? Every hand in the room went up. Admiral Choi smiled grimly. Then we'd better get started. I'll need every available ship, every trained soldier, and every weapon we can spare. The Zilani sent us a whisper asking for help. It's time to show them what Earth's answer sounds like. Within 12 hours, the largest military fleet in human history was preparing for its first interstellar mission. Zilani had asked for sanctuary. But they were going to get something much more powerful, the full fury of an aroused humanity. The space around Zilani Prime shimmered and twisted. As reality itself began to tear apart, Elder Tisera stood in the observation chamber of the Great Tower, watching the impossible sight through the protective crystal windows. Massive rips appeared in the fabric of space, growing larger and darker with each passing moment. Is happening? Whispered Counselor Vexera, her forearms wrapped around herself in fear. The Void Swarm cannot do this. This is something else. Tisara pressed her face against the cool crystal, her breath fogging the surface. I think someone heard our message. The first ship emerged from the spatial tier like a metal beast awakening from sleep. It was enormous, easily 10 times larger than the biggest Zilani vessel, with a dark hull covered in strange angular structures. More ships followed, each one different but equally intimidating. They moved with purpose and precision, forming attack formations as they entered the system. By the ancient lights, gasped Vexera, what manner of beings build such things? Human fleets spread across space like a storm front. The flagship called Indomitable led the formation. Its 2-kilometer length bristling with weapons that the Zilani had never seen before. Smaller ships flanked it in perfect order, their crews already preparing for battle. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Nam Junho studied the tactical display with cold eyes. His uniform was crisp and clean, but his face showed the hardness of someone who had seen too much war. Around him, his crew worked with efficient silence, each person focused on their assigned task. Report, Genho ordered. The Void Swarm has positioned itself between us and the planet, replied Commander Yang Soo-jin from the weapons station. Estimated enemy count is 3,000 mechanical units of various sizes. Junho nodded slowly, and the Zilani. Safe on the planet's surface, sir. They have withdrawn all their ships to defensive positions around their homeworld. The captain studied the enemy formation on his screen. The Void Swarm looked like a massive cloud of metal insects, each unit connected to the others through some invisible network. They moved as one organism, flowing through space with unnatural coordination. All ships. This is Captain Junho, he announced over the fleet communication system. Remember your training. These machines think they can consume anything in their path. Today we teach them that they are wrong. First shots came from the human fleet without warning. Massive kinetic cannons fired projectiles at incredible speed, each one carrying enough energy to shatter a small moon. The projectiles struck the void swarm like hammers, punching through their metal hulls and exploding in brilliant flashes of light. Elder Sara watched in amazement as the human weapons lit up the darkness of space. Zalani had never seen such destructive power used with such precision. Each shot was perfectly aimed, each explosion carefully calculated to cause maximum damage. "They fight like the storm winds of our ancient myths," she whispered to Vexera. "Beautiful and terrible at the same time." The void swarm responded by rushing toward the human fleet, their mechanical forms changing shape as they prepared to attack. But the humans were ready. Plasma cannons opened fire, sending streams of superheated gas that cut through the enemy ranks like burning swords. "Commander," Yang Sujin coordinated the fighter squadrons with practiced skill. Dozens of small human ships launched from the larger vessels, moving with incredible speed and agility. The pilots flew directly into the heart of the swarm formation, their weapons blazing as they danced between the mechanical enemies. "Fighter Group Alpha, adjust your approach vector," Sujin ordered into her headset. "I want you to hit them from below while Group Beta attacks from above." The human fighters moved like a school of fish, each pilot perfectly synchronized with the others. They fired their weapons in coordinated bursts, creating crossfire patterns that trapped the void swarm units in deadly killing zones. Major Kang Dahane led the most dangerous mission of all. Her Marines were preparing to board the largest enemy vessels, fighting the machines face to face in their own corridors. It was the kind of close combat that required incredible courage and skill. "Remember," Daehun told her soldiers as they prepared their assault shuttles, "these machines learn from every encounter. Don't give them time to adapt. Hit them hard and fast." The boarding shuttles launched from the human ships like arrows, racing toward the enemy vessels while dodging defensive fire. Daehun's Marines wore powered armor that made them look like metal giants, each one carrying weapons designed to tear through the strongest materials. The battle raged for hours, and slowly the tide began to turn. The void swarm, which had conquered hundreds of worlds, found itself facing an enemy unlike anything it had encountered before. The humans fought with a combination of advanced technology and raw aggression that confused the mechanical minds. "They're retreating," shouted one of the human officers. "The swarm is pulling back from the planet." For the first time in 1,000 years, the void swarm was losing a battle. The machines that had consumed entire civilizations were being destroyed by beings they had never seen before. Elder Tissera felt tears of relief running down her cheeks as she watched the human fleet press their attack. The strangers who had heard their whisper for help were not just offering sanctuary. They were offering something much more precious: hope. The thunder of human weapons echoed across the system as Earth's children showed the galaxy what happened when someone threatened the innocent. The battle had been raging for 18 hours, and the void swarm was learning. The mechanical entities began to adapt their tactics, creating new formations and defensive patterns to counter human weapons. But Major Kang Dahane had seen this before in the war simulations back on Earth. "They think they're getting smarter," she said into her cum unit as her boarding shuttle approached the largest swarm vessel. "But they don't understand the most important thing about humans." Her Marines sat in the cramped shuttle, checking their weapons one final time. Each soldier wore heavy combat armor that could withstand the vacuum of space and the cutting beams of the mechanical enemies. Their faces were calm behind their helmets, showing the confidence that came from years of training. "What's that, Major?" asked Sergeant Kim Hanzol, the youngest member of her squad. "We don't fight fair," Dahayan replied with a grim smile. "We never fight the same way twice." The shuttle slammed into the side of the enemy vessel, its cutting torch burning through the metal hull in seconds. Daheen was the first through the breach, her assault rifle already firing as she entered the alien corridor. The interior of the swarm ship was a maze of metal passages, filled with moving mechanical parts. 3 void swarm units rushed toward her, their bodies shifting and changing as they adapted to her weapon. But Dahan was already moving, rolling to the side and switching to her plasma cutter. The machines had learned to defend against bullets, but they were not prepared for the concentrated heat beam that sliced through their armor. "Move fast," she ordered her squad. "Don't let them predict your actions." The Marines spread through the ship like a virus, each team taking a different route toward the central control chamber. They used explosives to blast through walls, created false retreats to confuse the enemy, constantly changed their weapons and tactics. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Nam Jun-ho watched the tactical display with growing satisfaction. The Void Swarm was becoming more desperate, making mistakes as it tried to counter the unpredictable human attacks. "Sir, the enemy is concentrating their forces around the planet," reported Commander Yang Sujin. "They're trying to use the Zilani as shields." Junho's expression hardened. "Launch the drone swarms. Out. I want every approach vector covered." Thousands of small robot fighters poured from the human ships, each one no bigger than a person but armed. With powerful explosives, they moved in random patterns, making it impossible for the Void Swarm to predict their movements or coordinate an effective defense. Commander Park Si-woo sat in the Electronic Warfare Center, his fingers dancing across multiple keyboards as he penetrated the enemy's communication network. The Void Swarm shared information through quantum links, but human hackers had learned to turn this strength into a weakness. "I'm introducing chaos algorithms into their command structure," he reported to the bridge. "Every time they try to coordinate, the false data will make them hesitate." The effect was immediate. Void Swarm units began attacking each other, confused by the conflicting orders flooding their shared consciousness. Some stopped moving entirely, paralyzed by the contradictory information filling their mechanical minds. Elder Tisera and the Zilani Council watched from their observation chamber as the humans demonstrated something their peaceful civilization had never developed: the art of creative destruction. The human forces didn't just fight, they improvised, adapted, and turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. "Look at that," whispered Counselor Vexera, pointing to her viewing screen. "One of their damaged ships is accelerating toward the swarm formation." The human cruiser Defiant had taken severe damage to its engines and weapon systems, but its crew was not ready to surrender. Captain Lee Jae-sung ordered all non-essential personnel to evacuate in escape pods while he and a skeleton crew guided the ship directly into the heart of the enemy formation. "This is Captain Lee to all ships," he announced over the comm system. "We're going to show these machines what happens when you threaten innocent people." The Defiant exploded like a miniature star when it collided with the largest swarm vessel, taking dozens of enemy units with it. The sacrifice bought precious time for the evacuation shuttles to reach safety and created a gap in the enemy formation that other human ships quickly exploited. Major Doheen's Marines had reached the control, the center of the swarm ship they had boarded. The chamber was filled with pulsing mechanical brains that coordinated the activities of hundreds of individual units. But instead of trying to destroy them, Dahan had a different idea. "Plant the virus transmitters," she ordered, "if they want to share information. Let's give them something really interesting to think about." The transmitters released a flood of false data into the swarm's network, including detailed information about human weapons, tactics, and fleet positions. But all of it was lies, carefully crafted to make the machines overestimate human strength and underestimate human weaknesses. The Void Swarm began to retreat from positions they could have held, avoided attacks that were never coming, and wasted resources defending against threats that existed only in their corrupted databanks. "They're learning," observed Vexera, as she watched the enemy formation begin to collapse. "But they're learning the wrong lessons." Tissera nodded slowly. "These humans fight like the chaos storms of our mythology. Unpredictable, creative, and absolutely unstoppable once they commit to battle." For the first time in 1,000 years of conquest, the Void Swarm was truly afraid. They had encountered an enemy that refused to follow the rules of warfare, that treated every battle as a puzzle to be solved rather than a simple test of strength. The humans had shown them something terrifying: that intelligence combined with determination could overcome any obstacle. The last Void Swarm vessel died in a burst of brilliant light that illuminated the entire Zilani system. Captain Nam Jun-ho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the debris field where moments before a 1,000-year plague had threatened to consume everything. The silence that followed was deeper than the vacuum of space itself. "All enemy contacts eliminated," reported Commander Yang Sujin, her voice tired but satisfied. "The system is clear." Junho nodded slowly, then activated the communication. "System. All ships. This is actual. Stand down to defensive positions. The threat has been neutralized." On Zalani Prime, Elder Tessara watched the floating wreckage with tears streaming down her blue cheeks. The mechanical monsters that had destroyed 3 of their worlds were gone, reduced to nothing more than scattered metal and fading energy. Signatures. Her people were safe. "I cannot believe it," whispered Counselor Vexera. "They actually did it. They destroyed the entire swarm." "Not just destroyed," Tessara replied, her voice filled with wonder. "They eliminated every trace of it. These humans, they fight like the ancient storm gods of our mythology." The human fleet moved into orbit around Zalani Prime with careful precision.
Ow.
The massive warships that had brought such terrible destruction to their enemies now seemed almost gentle as they took defensive positions around the planet. Transport shuttles began launching from the fleet, carrying the first human visitors to the Zalani homeworld. Captain Junho's shuttle landed in the central plaza of the capital city, where thousands of Zalani had gathered to welcome their saviors. The captain stepped out wearing his formal dress uniform, followed by a small group of officers and diplomats. He looked around at the crystal spires and flowing architecture of the alien city, impressed by its beauty. Elder Tessara approached him slowly, her forearms spread in the traditional Zalani greeting of respect. "Captain Junho," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I am Elder Tessara, speaker for the Zalani people. We cannot find words to express our gratitude." Junho bowed respectfully. "Elder Tessara, I am honored to meet you. Your people sent a message asking for help. We simply answered." "But you gave us so much more than help," Tessara replied. "You gave us our future. Our children will live because of what you have done." The captain smiled, his weathered face showing genuine warmth. "That's what we do. When someone calls for help, we don't calculate the cost. We just come." Ambassador Li Jamin stepped forward, carrying a sealed container that held the first formal treaty between Earth and an alien civilization. "Elder Tessara, my government has authorized me to offer a permanent alliance between our peoples. We would be honored to call the Zalani our friends." The ceremony that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. 2 completely different species, one born from peace and one forged in war, joined together in friendship. The Zalani offered their knowledge of art, science, and philosophy, while the humans promised protection and military cooperation. Over the following days, human engineers worked alongside Zalani scientists to rebuild the damaged orbital stations and defensive systems. Admiral Choi Dae-han established a permanent human base on the outer moon, staffed with volunteers who would train Zalani defenders in basic military tactics. Major Kong Dae-han found herself teaching small groups of young Zalani how to handle simple weapons and coordinate defensive strategies. The peaceful aliens were slow learners when it came to warfare, but they were eager to ensure their people would never again be helpless against aggressors. "We do not wish to become warriors like you," explained one young Zalani student named Kesra. "But we understand now that sometimes peace must be defended with strength. The goal is not to make you into soldiers," Dae-han replied patiently. "The goal is to make sure you can protect yourselves until help arrives." Commander Park Si-woo established a communication network that connected the Zalani system directly to Earth's deep space monitoring stations. Never again would the Zalani face threats alone. The moment any danger appeared, human reinforcements would be on their way. The most remarkable change came in the way the Zalani viewed the universe. For centuries, they had believed that all intelligent life was inherently peaceful like themselves. The Void Swarm had shattered that illusion, but the humans had shown them something even more important. That good could triumph over evil when brave people were willing to fight for what was right. "You have taught us that the galaxy is not safe," Elder Tessara said to Captain Junho as his fleet prepared to depart. "But you have also shown us that it is not empty of hope." Junho shook her hand with both of his, a gesture that had become the new symbol of human-Zilani friendship. "Elder, your people sent a whisper into the void asking for sanctuary, but you gave us something far more valuable in return." "What is that?" she asked. "You reminded us why we fight," Junho replied. "Not for conquest or glory, but to protect. Those who cannot protect themselves. That is a lesson we will never forget." As the human fleet jumped back into hyperspace, leaving behind a small garrison and a promise of eternal friendship, the Zilani understood that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Earth had not just heard their cry for help, it had answered. With everything it had, the galaxy would remember this day as the moment when humanity announced its presence, not with conquest, but with compassion backed by unstoppable force. The Zilani had whispered for help, and Earth had responded with thunder.